You can buy the whole city, Mr. Callahan, but you cannot buy what you broke. Naomi Brooks said the words softly, yet they seemed to stop the entire room. Marcus Callahan sat behind the massive mahogany desk in his private library, surrounded by dark wood, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the cold Chicago lake. On the desk between them rested a thick, white envelope. It contained enough money to change Naomi's life. Marcus could have placed a number on almost anything in his world. Buildings had prices. Businesses had prices. Contracts had prices. Even problems seemed to have prices. But Naomi had just told him that forgiveness was different. She stood several feet away, still wearing the simple black uniform she had worn countless times inside his estate. Her deep brown-black skin caught the warm light from the fireplace, while her oval face remained calm despite the pain behind her dark brown eyes. Marcus studied her carefully. At 43, he had spent most of his life learning how to remain composed when everyone else became uncertain. His dark brown hair was slicked back, threaded with natural gray, and his short boxed beard carried the same subtle silver. The black and gray tattoos covering his neck and upper chest disappeared beneath his open black shirt, while additional ink covered his hands and fingers. His tailored black suit fit his broad shoulders and muscular frame perfectly. Usually, the sight of him was enough to make people measure every word. Naomi did not. She looked at the envelope once, then looked back at him. "How much?" Marcus asked. Naomi shook her head. "Nothing." He leaned back slightly. "Everyone has a price. Maybe everyone you know does." Her voice remained gentle. "But I do not." The room became painfully quiet. Marcus looked toward the envelope. It was an amount he had chosen because he thought generosity could repair what pride had damaged. He had been wrong before. He was beginning to understand that he had been wrong again. 6 months earlier, Naomi had arrived at the Callahan estate before sunrise with one small black bag and a simple goal: do her job well, keep her independence, and stay out of a world that was never hers. The estate sat along the Chicago lakefront, its stone exterior rising behind iron gates, its interior filled with polished marble, dark wood, crystal lighting, and rooms larger than the apartment where Naomi lived. She knew her position. She also knew her worth. Marcus had first noticed her because she did not behave like everyone else around him. Employees usually became careful when he entered a room. Naomi simply continued working. She did not flatter him. She did not ask personal questions. She did not stare at his expensive watch or the cars waiting outside. One morning, Marcus overheard her helping an older housekeeper carry a stack of folded linens. "You do not have to help me," the woman said. Naomi smiled. "Neither do you." Marcus stopped near the doorway. Naomi continued, unaware that he was listening. "People deserve respect before they prove they deserve it." Those words stayed with him. At the time, Marcus did not understand why. He would understand later, after one decision changed everything between them. And when that day came, he would discover that the one thing his money could never purchase was the one thing he wanted most: the chance to be forgiven. 6 months earlier, before the envelope and the silence between them, Naomi Brooks knew Marcus Callahan only as the man whose name could make an entire room become quiet. She had heard stories about his influence long before she ever stepped inside his estate, but stories meant little to her. She had learned that wealthy men were still people, and powerful people were still capable of making mistakes. What mattered was how they treated those who could not offer them anything in return. Naomi arrived at the Callahan estate on a cold Chicago morning, carrying one black work bag and a small lunch container. The stone entrance rose behind tall iron gates, and beyond it stood a mansion overlooking the lake, all marble floors, dark wood, crystal lights, and enormous windows. It was beautiful, but Naomi did not allow the surroundings to make her feel smaller. She had come to work. That was all. Mrs. Harris, the senior housekeeper, showed her through the main rooms and explained the household routines. "Mr. Callahan values privacy," she said. Naomi nodded. "So do I." Mrs. Harris smiled at that answer. Marcus was rarely seen during the morning hours, but when he appeared, people noticed. He moved through the estate with quiet confidence, usually dressed in a tailored black suit, his dark brown hair brushed back with natural silver running through it, his short boxed beard neatly trimmed. His light olive skin, broad shoulders, and controlled expression gave him an unmistakable presence. He never needed to demand attention. It simply followed him. Naomi noticed him, Of course, but she did not stare. That was one of the first things Marcus noticed about her. She treated him like an employer, not a celebrity. When he walked through the kitchen, she continued arranging clean dishes. When he passed through the hallway, she simply stepped aside and returned to her work. There was no nervous smile and no unnecessary compliment. One afternoon, Marcus entered the library while Naomi was dusting the shelves. He noticed a small section of books arranged unevenly. "Those are out of order," he said. Naomi looked over. "I know." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You know? I was going to fix them after I finished the shelves." He studied her for a moment. "Most people would have fixed them immediately." Naomi gave a faint smile. "Most people are not me." For the first time, Marcus almost smiled. Then he walked away. Over the following weeks, he began noticing other things. Naomi remembered which staff members preferred to work in the quieter rooms. She helped Mrs. Harris without being asked. She stayed late when someone needed assistance, but never complained about it. More importantly, she treated everyone with the same basic respect. One evening, Marcus saw her give her own dinner to a young kitchen employee who had forgotten his meal. "You need it more than I do," Naomi said. Marcus stood silently in the hallway. He had spent years surrounded by people who calculated every favor, every invitation, every conversation. Naomi seemed to calculate nothing. She simply did what she believed was right. That quality unsettled him because he could not buy it, impress it, or command it. He could only observe it. And slowly, without realizing it, Marcus began looking for her whenever he entered a room. Naomi noticed his attention eventually, but she did not misunderstand it. She knew the distance between their worlds. He was a man accustomed to control. She was a woman determined to keep her dignity. Neither knew yet that those differences would bring them closer before pushing them apart. And neither could have imagined that one ordinary envelope would eventually turn everything between them into a question of trust. The envelope appeared on a Tuesday morning, but the secret behind it had begun several days earlier. Naomi Brooks noticed the change before anyone said a word. The Callahan estate was usually precise, almost silent in its routines, yet that morning the hallway outside Marcus Callahan's private study felt different. Two unfamiliar men had arrived before breakfast, and Mrs. Harris had quietly instructed the staff to stay away from the West Wing until further notice. Naomi did not ask why. She had learned that privacy was part of the job. Still, as she carried fresh linens past the study, she heard Marcus speaking inside. She was never supposed to find out. Naomi stopped for only a second. Another voice answered, lower and uneasy. "Then you need to decide what you are going to tell her." Naomi continued walking. She did not know who they meant, and she did not intend to discover it. But later that afternoon, Marcus called her into the library. He stood beside the tall windows overlooking Lake Michigan, his tailored black suit sharply contrasting with the pale winter light. His dark brown hair was slicked back, natural gray running through roughly 30% of it, and his short boxed beard carried the same subtle silver. His black shirt was open at the upper buttons, revealing part of the fixed black and gray tattoos across his upper chest and neck. His expression was calm, confident, and unreadable. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Naomi asked. Marcus looked at her for a moment. "Yes." He walked to the desk and picked up a white envelope. "This belongs to you." Naomi stared at her name written neatly across the front. "What is it?" "Something I should have given you earlier." She reached toward it, then stopped. "Why?" Marcus did not answer immediately. That hesitation was enough to make her cautious. "Because there are things happening in this house that you should not be involved in," he finally said. Naomi looked directly at him. "Then why put my name on an envelope connected to them?" Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "It is not connected in the way you think." "Then tell me the way it is connected." Silence filled the library. Marcus had negotiated with executives who controlled entire companies. He had sat across from men who demanded impossible terms and made decisions worth millions of dollars. Yet Naomi's simple question unsettled him more than any business negotiation had in years. "I need more time," he said. Naomi's expression remained composed. "That is not an answer." "No," Marcus admitted. "It is not." She looked at the envelope again. "Then I will leave it here." She turned toward the door. Marcus spoke before she reached it. "Naomi." She stopped. "Do not open it until I tell you." She looked over her shoulder. "You are asking me to trust you without telling me why." Marcus said nothing. Naomi gave a small nod, but there was disappointment in her eyes. "That makes it difficult." She walked away, leaving the envelope untouched on his desk. That evening, Marcus returned to the library alone. The envelope was exactly where she had left it. He picked it up and stared at her name. Inside was a document he had prepared weeks earlier, one that could change Naomi's position at the estate completely. But now the situation was more complicated. Someone had been using staff records without authorization, and Naomi's name had appeared in those records. Marcus had discovered the problem too late. What he did not know was that the person responsible had already realized Naomi had noticed something unusual. And by the next morning, one valuable item from the estate would be missing. Naomi would be the last employee seen near the room, and Marcus would be forced to choose between what the evidence appeared to say and what he already knew about the woman standing before him. The crystal sculpture disappeared just before noon. It had stood in the library for years, displayed inside a glass cabinet beneath a portrait of Marcus Callahan's late mother. To Marcus, it was more than an expensive object. It was one of the few things in the estate that carried personal meaning. When the estate manager discovered the empty cabinet, the entire household seemed to slow. Employees gathered quietly in the main hall while Marcus stood near the staircase, listening without interrupting. When was the library last cleaned? He asked. The estate manager checked the schedule. Yesterday afternoon. Naomi was assigned to that room. The words were followed by silence. Naomi stood near the edge of the gathering, her hands folded calmly in front of her black uniform. She felt every eye turned toward her. I did not take it, she said. Her voice was steady. Marcus looked at her. He knew how she worked. He knew her habits. He knew she had never taken anything from the estate. But before he could respond, another employee mentioned that Naomi had been seen carrying a box from the library earlier that week. The detail sounded suspicious. Marcus's expression remained controlled. Check the records, he said. Naomi watched him carefully. She was not afraid of an investigation. What hurt was the uncertainty in his eyes. A few minutes later, her work bag was placed on the table. Naomi opened it herself. Inside were her lunch container, a notebook, a bottle of water, a small wallet, and a few personal items. Nothing else. The room remained silent. The missing sculpture had not been found, but neither had anything connecting Naomi to it. The estate manager suggested reviewing the security records before making any conclusion. Marcus immediately agreed. No accusations until we know what happened, he said. Naomi looked at him. For a brief moment, she thought the matter would be handled fairly. Then Marcus received a message from his assistant. He stepped away and read it in silence. The message contained a security report showing that Naomi had entered the library at 2:15 in the afternoon and left at 2:42. The sculpture had been present in an earlier photograph, but was missing later that day. Marcus looked back toward her. Naomi saw the hesitation. You think I did it, she said quietly. Marcus shook his head. I did not say that. You did not have to. Her words made him pause. Naomi, we are still investigating. Then investigate. She held his gaze. But do not look at me as if my position in this house makes me less trustworthy. Marcus remained silent. She waited for him to say something that would reassure her. Something that would tell her he knew the person he had spent months observing. Instead, he said, I need answers. Naomi's expression changed. So do I. She reached into her pocket, removed her employee badge, and placed it carefully on the table. If you need to investigate me, then I will not stand in your way. But I will not stay somewhere I have to prove that I am an honest person every time something goes wrong. Marcus looked at the badge. Naomi. She picked up her bag. I did nothing wrong. Then she walked toward the entrance. No one stopped her. Marcus watched her leave through the tall glass doors and disappear beyond the stone steps. Outside, the Chicago wind moved across the driveway, carrying the first light snow of the season. Inside, Marcus remained motionless. The evidence was incomplete, yet something far more important had already been damaged. He had not accused her, but he had failed to trust her when she needed him to. And sometimes, Marcus would soon learn, silence could hurt almost as much as an accusation. Marcus Callahan spent the entire evening staring at the security records, but the more he reviewed them, the less sense the evidence made. Naomi had entered the library at 2:15 in the afternoon and left at 2:42. Yet the camera footage showed something the first report had failed to mention. At 3:07, someone else entered the corridor carrying a large delivery box. Marcus paused the recording and enlarged the image. The uniform belonged to Thomas Reed. one of the estate employees who had worked there for nearly 8 years. Marcus asked for every access record connected to the library, the study, and the storage rooms. Within minutes, a pattern began to emerge. Thomas had entered restricted areas several times during the previous month, usually when Naomi was working nearby. More troubling was the fact that he had accessed staff records without authorization. Naomi's name appeared in several of those records. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming colder, not with anger, but with realization. The situation had never been as simple as a missing sculpture. Someone had deliberately created confusion around Naomi. Marcus remembered the envelope on his desk. He opened it and removed the document inside. It was the recommendation he had prepared weeks earlier after reviewing Naomi's work. The head housekeeper had described her as dependable, honest, and unusually considerate toward other employees. Marcus had planned to offer her a permanent position with better pay and expanded benefits. The envelope had nothing to do with the missing sculpture. It had been meant as recognition. Somehow, however, Naomi had seen it at the worst possible moment, when everything around her was already beginning to look suspicious. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He remembered her question in the main hall. "You think I did it?" He had answered that he needed answers. He had thought he was being careful. Now he understood that carefulness without trust could feel like betrayal. Marcus asked his estate manager to bring Thomas to the office. The conversation that followed confirmed what the records had suggested. Thomas had been facing serious financial pressure and had made poor decisions involving several valuable items. He had used Naomi's schedule to make it appear that she had been responsible for the missing sculpture. The truth was finally clear. Naomi had been innocent from the beginning. Marcus immediately ordered the official records corrected and instructed the estate manager to notify every employee that Naomi had been completely cleared. Then he looked at the clock. It was almost 7. He could have sent someone to her apartment with a letter. He could have offered money, a new position, or anything else that would make the situation easier to manage. But Marcus knew that would be the wrong answer. He had already made one mistake by treating trust like something that could be controlled. He would not make another by trying to purchase forgiveness. Instead, he went himself. When Naomi opened her apartment door, surprise crossed her face. Marcus stood in the hallway without an envelope, without a gift, and without an assistant. His posture was calm, but his expression was different from the man she had known at the estate. "You were right," he said. Naomi remained silent. "You were right to leave." Her eyes stayed on his. "I was cleared," she asked. "Completely." Marcus nodded. "The person responsible has been identified. Your name has been removed from every report." Naomi took a slow breath. "Thank you for telling me." Marcus waited, then said the words he had never expected to struggle with. "I am sorry." Naomi looked at him for several seconds. "I believe you mean that." Marcus nodded. "I do." She did not invite him inside. She did not forgive him. She simply closed the door gently after saying, "Good night, Mr. Callahan." Marcus stood alone in the hallway for a moment. For the first time, he understood that proving someone innocent was not the same as restoring their trust. He could correct a record in minutes. He could replace almost anything. But what he had damaged between them would require something money had never taught him to give: time. The next morning, Marcus Callahan arrived at the estate before sunrise, but for the first time in years, the quiet halls did not make him feel in control. They made him think. Naomi's final words at her apartment had stayed with him. She had not shouted. She had not demanded anything. She had simply closed the door, leaving him alone with the consequences of his decision. Marcus had spent his life solving problems quickly. If a business failed, he rebuilt it. If a negotiation stalled, he changed the terms. If someone wanted something, he found a way to provide it. But Naomi had shown him that some mistakes became worse when a person tried to solve them too quickly. His assistant arrived with a folder that morning. "I prepared the new employment offer," he said. Marcus opened it and read the first page. Higher salary, paid time off, better benefits, a private apartment near the lake. Everything was generous. Everything was practical. Everything was wrong. Marcus closed the folder. "Take it back." His assistant looked surprised. "You do not want to offer her the position?" "Not like this." He placed the folder on the desk. "If I give her money now, she will wonder whether I am trying to buy my way out of what happened." The assistant nodded and left. Marcus remained alone. Later that afternoon, he went to see Naomi again. He did not bring the offer. He did not bring flowers. He did not bring an expensive gift. He simply stood outside her apartment with the same calm expression he carried into every important room, although his eyes revealed something new. Uncertainty. When Naomi opened the door, she looked at him quietly. "I thought you already told me everything." "I did." Marcus paused. "But I did not say everything I needed to say." Naomi waited. "I was wrong," he said. "Not because the investigation was incomplete. I was wrong because I knew you well enough to know better." Naomi's expression softened slightly, but she remained cautious. Marcus continued, "I watched you work for months. I saw how you treated people when no one was watching. I knew your character. And when something went wrong, I allowed suspicion to become louder than what I already knew." Naomi looked down for a moment. "That hurt." "I know. Do you?" She looked back at him. "You were the person everyone expected to be fair. When you stayed silent, it felt like my position mattered more to you than my character." Marcus absorbed the words without defending himself. "You are right." The hallway became quiet. Naomi studied his face. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus answered honestly. "Because you deserve an apology that is not attached to an offer." She nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." Marcus took a breath. "I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking you to forgive me. I only wanted you to know that I understand what I did." Naomi remained silent for several seconds. Then she said, "I am not ready to forgive you." Marcus nodded immediately. "I understand." "You really do?" "I am. Learning." A faint sadness appeared in her eyes. "That is different from what I expected you to say." Marcus gave a quiet nod. "I used to think having power meant being able to control what happened next." Naomi looked at him. "And now?" "Now I think it means knowing when something is not mine to control." For the first time, Naomi did not look away. She did not invite him inside, but she did not close the door either. "Good night, Marcus." He paused at hearing his first name. "Good night, Naomi." He walked away without asking for anything more. Over the following weeks, he kept his promise. He did not send gifts. He did not call repeatedly. He did not use his influence to place pressure on her. Instead, he began changing the household itself. He listened to employees before making decisions. He asked questions before drawing conclusions. He made sure complaints were heard without regard to someone's position. And he did all of it when Naomi was nowhere around to see him. That was what made the change real. Marcus was no longer trying to convince Naomi that he had changed. He was finally learning to change because he knew he needed to. And somewhere beyond the walls of the estate, Naomi would soon hear about those changes. But this time, she would not believe them because Marcus had said so. She would believe them only if his actions proved it. 3 weeks passed, and Marcus Callahan kept his distance exactly as he had promised. He did not send Naomi messages through his assistant. He did not appear outside her apartment again. He did not leave expensive gifts at her door or ask Mrs. Harris to persuade her. Instead, he returned to the estate and began changing the things he had once considered unimportant. The first change was small. At breakfast, an employee quietly mentioned that the kitchen schedule was becoming difficult for the older members of the staff. Marcus listened without interrupting. He asked what would make the schedule fairer, then approved the adjustment. Another employee raised a concern about communication between the household staff and management. Marcus listened again. He did not dismiss the problem or tell someone else to handle it. He stayed until the employee had finished speaking. Word spread through the estate slowly. The man who once made decisions before anyone could finish explaining was beginning to ask questions first. Naomi heard about it from Mrs. Harris. She had not returned to the estate, but she still spoke with the older housekeeper from time to time. "He is different," Mrs. Harris said one afternoon over the phone. Naomi was quiet. "People say that when they want someone to come back," she finally answered. "He is not asking you to come back," Mrs. Harris replied. "That is why I believe it." Naomi looked out her apartment window toward the Chicago street below. She wanted to believe that people could change. But trust was not something she could rebuild because someone else said the right words. She needed to see it herself. A few days later, Mrs. Harris called again. The estate was preparing for a small charity luncheon, and several staff members needed extra help. Naomi hesitated before agreeing. She told herself she was returning for Mrs. Harris, not for Marcus. When she arrived at the estate, the familiar marble entrance looked exactly the same, yet the atmosphere felt different. Employees moved through the halls with more confidence. The kitchen was quieter. Even the younger staff members seemed less nervous. Naomi entered the dining room carrying a box of folded linens, and saw Marcus standing near the far windows. He wore his tailored black suit and open black shirt, with part of the fixed black and gray tattoos visible across his upper chest and neck. His dark brown hair was slicked back, natural silver running through it, and his short boxed beard was neatly trimmed. His light olive skin and broad shoulders gave him the same commanding presence she remembered. But when he noticed her, he did not walk toward her. He simply nodded. "Good morning, Naomi." "Good morning, Marcus." Then he stepped aside and returned to his work. That simple gesture surprised her more than an apology would have. Later, Naomi helped Mrs. Harris organize the dining room. From across the room, she watched Marcus speak with a young employee who appeared uncertain about a scheduling issue. Marcus listened patiently, asked 2 questions, and thanked the employee before walking away. He did not know Naomi had been watching. She realized that mattered. This was not a performance designed for her. That evening, after the luncheon ended, Naomi returned to the library to collect her bag. Marcus was there, standing beside the tall windows overlooking the lake. He noticed her, but did not approach. "You can take your time," he said. Naomi nodded. She picked up her bag, then paused. "I noticed the changes." Marcus looked at her. "I am glad. You did not have to tell me about them." "I know." She studied his face. "That is why I noticed." Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment. "I am still learning." Naomi gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Maybe." Then she walked toward the door. Marcus did not stop her. But this time, Naomi did not leave because she wanted distance. She left because she needed time to decide whether the man standing behind her had finally understood what respect truly required. For the first time since Naomi had returned to the estate, Marcus allowed himself to believe that trust might not be impossible to rebuild. He did not tell himself that she had forgiven him. He knew better. Instead, he focused on something smaller and more important, proving that his respect for her no longer depended on what she decided to give him in return. A few days after the luncheon, Naomi came back to the estate to help Mrs. Harris prepare several rooms for an upcoming community event. She expected to see Marcus, but she did not expect to find him sitting alone in the library with 2 cups of coffee on the table. One was black with no sugar. The other was prepared with the same simple ingredients she preferred. Naomi stopped at the doorway. Marcus looked up. "I remembered." She glanced at the coffee. "You did." He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Only if you have time." Naomi hesitated, then walked inside. She sat across from him, leaving a respectful distance between them. For several seconds, neither spoke. Outside the tall windows, the lake reflected the soft, gray afternoon sky. Marcus finally broke the silence. "I want you to know something." Naomi waited. "I am not asking you to forgive me." Her expression remained cautious. "You have said that before." "I know." Marcus looked down at his hands, the black and gray tattoos visible across his fingers. "But I mean it differently now. Before, I was still hoping that saying the right thing would change your mind. Now I understand that your decision belongs to you." Naomi studied him. "What changed?" Marcus took a slow breath. "You did not." He looked directly at her. "I did." The answer surprised her. Marcus continued. "I spent most of my life believing that control was the same thing as strength. If I had enough money, enough influence, enough information, I thought there was always a way to determine the outcome. Then you walked away, and I realized I could not decide what you felt." Naomi looked toward the window. "That must have been difficult for you." A faint smile touched his face. "It was." She looked back at him. "And you are still here." "Yes." "Why?" Marcus was silent for a moment. "Because leaving would be easier than becoming better." The words stayed between them. Naomi had expected another polished explanation. Instead, she heard something much simpler. Something honest. She lowered her eyes to the coffee in front of her. "I was angry with you for a long time." Marcus nodded. "You had every right. I thought you saw me as someone beneath you." His expression became serious. "I did not." Naomi looked at him. "But you treated me like it." Marcus did not argue. "Yes." That single word carried more weight than any defense could have. Naomi took a slow breath. "I do not know if I can forget that day. You should not have to. And I do not know what happens next." Marcus nodded. "Neither do I." For the first time, Naomi smiled without hesitation. It was small, but genuine. Marcus noticed it and said nothing. He understood now that even a smile could become something he had no right to claim. Naomi finished her coffee and stood. "I should help Mrs. Harris." Marcus stood as well. "Of course." She walked toward the door, then stopped. Thank you for the coffee. Marcus gave a quiet nod. You are welcome. Naomi left the library, but this time the silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt patient. And somewhere between two untouched expectations and one honest conversation, the distance between them had become something neither of them feared anymore. The next Saturday evening, Naomi returned to the Callahan estate without telling herself what the visit meant. She had come to help Mrs. Harris prepare the library for a small community gathering, but as she walked through the familiar marble entrance, she realized she no longer felt like a stranger there. The house was still enormous, the dark wood still polished, and the lake still stretched beyond the tall windows, but something had changed. The atmosphere no longer felt controlled by fear of making a mistake. Employees spoke openly. Mrs. Harris laughed with the kitchen staff. Even the younger workers seemed more comfortable asking questions. Naomi understood why. Marcus had changed the way he treated people when he thought no one important was watching. That mattered more than any promise he could have made her. She found him in the library near sunset. He stood beside the window wearing his tailored black suit and black shirt opened at the upper buttons, revealing part of the fixed black and gray tattoos across his neck and upper chest. His dark brown hair was slicked back, natural gray running through approximately 30% of it, and his short boxed beard carried the same subtle silver. His light olive skin caught the fading golden light, and his broad shoulders gave him the same commanding presence she had noticed from the beginning. Yet his expression was different. Calm, confident, but no longer distant. He looked at her and smiled quietly. You came back. Naomi nodded. Mrs. Harris needed help. I know. He did not ask her to stay. He did not ask what she had decided about him. He simply returned his attention to the lake. Naomi placed a small stack of papers on the desk. Then she noticed something beside them. It was the envelope from months earlier. Marcus picked it up and handed it to her. This belongs to you. Naomi looked at the envelope with her name written across the front. What is inside? The original recommendation. I prepared for you before everything happened. She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter recognizing her honesty, reliability, and the respect she had shown to the staff. Naomi read every line. When she finished, she looked at Marcus. You wanted to give me this before the accusation? Yes. Why did you not tell me? Marcus lowered his eyes briefly. Because I kept waiting for the right moment. Naomi gave a small smile. There was never going to be a perfect moment. I know that now. Silence settled over the room. Naomi folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. Marcus. He looked at her. I have thought about what happened every day. His expression became serious. I am sorry. She nodded. I know. I cannot change that day. No, but I can make sure I never treat someone that way again. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. She remembered the man who had once allowed doubt to stand between them. Then she remembered the man who had changed when she was not watching. She remembered how he listened to employees, how he stopped using money as the answer to every problem, and how he had never once pressured her to return. Finally, she spoke. I forgive you. Marcus did not move. He simply looked at her, as though he understood the weight of those words. Thank you, he said quietly. Naomi held his gaze. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. I would never ask you to forget. And it does not mean everything becomes perfect overnight. Marcus nodded. I know. She smiled softly. Then maybe we can start again. A quiet warmth appeared in his eyes. I would like that. They stood together near the window as the last sunlight faded over Lake Michigan. No promises were demanded. No price was offered. No one tried to control what came next. For the first time, Marcus understood that the most valuable thing he had ever received was something no fortune could purchase. Naomi had not forgiven him because he was powerful. She had forgiven him because he had finally learned to respect her choice. And that evening, the man who could buy almost anything discovered the one thing that could only be earned: trust.